The most insidious and sophisticated weapon that ancient monarchs forged to protect their thrones did not lie in cold armories of swords and spears, nor did it lie in the elite ranks of imperial guards. It lay in the art of transforming a minuscule truth into a noose, a rope that tightened around an opponent's political life. When a superior wished to eliminate or neutralize the influence of someone who dared to question their authority, they rarely resorted to immediate violence. A display of brute force only signaled the king's fear and a lack of legitimacy. Instead, strategic minds would choose an invisible but fatal detour. They would completely ignore their opponent's ideals or political views, focusing instead on excavating the past and scrutinizing every detail to expose a personal blemish. This would be a genuine wrongdoing, yet it was one absolutely irrelevant to the actual reason the individual was being targeted. Using a disconnected truth to smear a reputation, and employing a moral stain to legitimize a political sentence. This was the pinnacle of ancient statecraft. Illustrious kings understood crowd psychology and the danger of creating martyr icons. If a dissenter was openly crushed by the court on charges of treason, that person would immediately become a hero in the hearts of the people. Public compassion always sides with the underdog who dares to defy absolute power. If a king used absolute force to strike directly at resistance, he would inadvertently acknowledge the strength and righteousness of his rival. A purely political sentence in such a case would not extinguish the flames of opposition, but only cause them to flare more fiercely, sowing the seeds for clandestine plots of overthrow. A wise sovereign never forced himself into such direct confrontation. He required a cleaner blade, a way to erase an enemy without leaving a single halo upon the head of the defeated. The art of exposure here was subtle in that the court had no need for fabricated slander. Fabrication is the clumsy move of the amateur, for a lie always carries the seeds of its own destruction. If a fabrication were unmasked, the superior would lose honor and be seen as a despicable tyrant by the populace. Masters of power do not use falsehoods, they use the truth. But it is a truth that has been pruned, extracted, and cast into a context entirely foreign to its original core purpose. Being mere flesh and blood, every human has dark corners, youthful mistakes, mundane vices, or petty self-interests. The court needed only to observe patiently, wait, and record. When the timing was ripe, as the opponent began to garner attention and become dangerous, these dusty dossiers would be opened. The king would not condemn the individual for rebellion, but for greed, for a past breach of trust with a friend, for an unsettled debt, or for violations of common morality in their private life. The most terrifying aspect of this tactic was its irrefutability. Standing before a tribunal established by the court, the victim was stripped entirely of the opportunity to justify their noble ideals. They were dragged down into the mire of a trivial moral dispute. If they denied it, the court would release concrete evidence and living witnesses to prove the past mistake was real. The victim was forced to bow their head and admit their fault. The moment that confession was uttered, the death sentence for their honor was pronounced. A grand resistance was suddenly reduced to the ridiculous farce of a self-serving opportunist. This statecraft completely manipulated the perception and psychology of the masses. The crowd is inherently incapable of analyzing complex policies or judging the merits of a power strategy. However, they are extremely sensitive to conventional moral standards. They might not understand why a high official vehemently opposes the court's tax policy, but they will certainly be outraged to learn that the official once defrauded a relative or led a debauched lifestyle. By unleashing a disconnected truth, the sovereign spectacularly shifted the battlefield. They transformed a conflict over political power into a moral purge. Once an opponent's personal stain was exposed, the public would automatically withdraw its support. The masses often think in rigid black and white terms. They default to the belief that if a person was dishonest in small matters, then all of that person's grand ideas must be lies masking private agendas. The heroic halo vanished, giving way to utter contempt. At this point, the king did not need to play the role of a dictator suppressing dissent. The sovereign could simply sit serenely on high, draped in the robes of a just judge, appearing pained at having to enforce the law to protect traditional morality. It was the masses themselves who would scream for the punishment of the antagonist. The superior uprooted the enemy entirely without a single drop of mud touching his own hands, while garnering the reputation of a protector of the kingdom's order. The process of setting the trap was often meticulously designed like a game of Go, with many invisible moves. Initially, whispers were released among the folk via anonymous agents. These rumors intentionally ignored the opponent's defiance of the court and focused solely on their character, integrity, and family secrets. Doubt slowly eroded the public's trust. Once the seeds of suspicion took deep root, the court would deliver the decisive blow through an investigation that appeared random and objective. A tiny mistake from years ago was suddenly magnified into a capital crime threatening the very survival of society. The throne's opponent fell into a state of total paralysis. All the sharpest arguments they had prepared to critique policy became useless, as the court did not question them on those matters at all. They were ambushed at their most human weakness, where they least expected it. The more they tried to explain that this was a political charade, the more they looked like a desperate person covering up a foul character. The logical trap had snapped shut. Truth, once weaponized, had completed its mission of crushing a human being's dignity. No historical glory awaits one imprisoned for petty errors or private dishonesty. The deeper goal of exposing these irrelevant truths was not merely to eliminate an opponent, but to isolate them from the very depths of the minds of those who once followed them. In the struggle for power, the strength of a challenger to the throne depends absolutely on the faith of their inner circle. By bringing to light pathetic behaviors in private life, the monarch injected an invisible venom into the opposition, the venom of disappointment. Those who once supported the dissenter would feel humiliated and betrayed. They had dreamed of a flawless leader, a role model who transcended mundane calculations to bring about a better order. When the curtain was pulled back and their idol was revealed as a person with base desires, the collapse of the image led to the collapse of the entire ideal. The banner of the righteous cause was torn apart by the very shame of those who once held it high. The dissenter now stood alone, shunned by former allies because no one wanted the reputation of being a devoted protector of a tarnished character. The court broke the enemy's sword by making the hands that once held it drop it voluntarily. Truth, through the lens of masters of power manipulation, has never been a sacred value to be preserved intact. Truth is merely a resource to be carved and molded to serve the longevity of the dynasty. When a king targeted an opponent, he realized that the whole truth often contained elements disadvantageous to the throne, as the opponent might actually expose flaws in the way the country was ruled. Therefore, the ancient ruling class practiced a ruthless art of power by fragmenting the truth. They discarded the grand truth regarding the opponent's ideals and filtered out only the small, dirty truth regarding personal faults. Utilizing a disconnected truth made the punishment so logical it became irreversible. Through this, the dynasty asserted its absolute power, not through crude coercion, but through the status of the arbiter of morality. The profound significance of the art of smearing with the truth lay not just in toppling an individual, but in sending a chilling message to all who harbored thoughts of resistance. It created an atmosphere of fear that blanketed the entire system. Anyone wishing to voice doubt about the throne had to shudder and look back at their own past. They wondered if they were clean enough to stand before the court's scrutiny. And since no one in this world can confidently declare themselves perfect and stainless, all resistance automatically faltered from the start. Everyone intending to challenge authority dug a grave for their own honor, for they understood that the king always held fragments of a flawed past as hostages. The greatest power of ancient times was the power that did not need to display brutality, yet still caused 10,000 people to sew their own mouths shut for fear of their own personal secrets. This statecraft was cold and terrifying, not because it took lives, but because it thoroughly destroyed the nobility of human reason. By using truth itself to manipulate the truth, those in power turned morality into a sharp tool to extract absolute submission. A portrait of governance was painted with a ruthlessly deep understanding of human psychology, where those who decided the kingdom's fate always knew how to hide behind the screen of strict laws. Those who once took pride in the ideal of changing the times eventually collapsed under the smallest and most naked stains of the human condition. The history of court power has never been a ballad of pure souls, but has always been a chessboard of minds that knew how to weaponize even the most honest things. In a world where the judgment of the masses is easily led by fragmented truths, one must wonder how many sentences passed in the name of morality were actually sophisticated plays staged to protect the throne.